Divas, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be doing a November Reads wrap-up. I'm excited. It was a pretty serviceable month. I feel like 30,000 foot view, I was like into what I'm reading, which is good because, sometimes there's nothing worse than those like shitty reading months. You know what I'm saying? Before we get started though, like, subscribe, tell a friend, tell an enemy. Let's keep the party going, yeah? Okay, we're gonna dive right in. The first book is actually a reread, and I'm not really a reread girly. I say that. Giovanni's Room, I will reread. I do try to read Baldwin's Giovanni's Room once a year. I try to do it around Pride. It doesn't happen every year, but like that's one I will reread because it's like brilliant. And if you haven't read it, would recommend. Yep. Okay. But I reread Audition by the diva Miss Katie Kitamura. Listen, it just broke open for me in this like whole new way. I would say if you've read it, I would suggest rereading it because I think it's a totally different experience. Yeah, it's a little complicated, but basically we've got these same set of characters and they have one set of relationships and they're engaging and like navigating one set of like interpersonal dynamics. Then we have part two and everything shifts. And then they're navigating a different set of dynamics. Some of them have the same relationship, but the relationship feels very different. And then other characters have different relationships with different characters in the book. So she imagined it as this duck rabbit painting. And one of the things I love about this book is that it is like inspired such discourse. I was at a dinner party last week and some folks felt really passionately in the opposite way that I did. And so it was really interesting to kind of get some folks' perspective. And I have drunk the Kool-Aid and I am in, and it felt very intentional to me. Other folks felt like maybe there was like a level of cop-out with not really kind of owning some of these choices. To me, it felt very intentional, and it felt like there were a lot of like purposeful artistic decisions that were being made. And I think that she really comes out and talks about that in chapter 5 of part 1. That is like, I think, the real linchpin of like what this book is about. And to me, it's worth all of the hubbub and the exploration and the reread because of those things. And she talks a lot in that chapter about like different realities and then living those realities and then how those realities can exist simultaneously. And then in the middle, there is this like no man's land, right? And what happens in that in between. And in the first section, I think we see that like duck rabbit, two different realities in like the micro, right? I think even in a lot of the chapters of part 1, we see that duality happening with different characters. And then we get to part 2, and that's where I really feel like the duck rabbit duality takes a macro approach. Did I say micro before? I meant micro for part 1 and then macro when we look at the whole once we get to part 2. And that's where I feel like we're really having those two different realities. And then like there's this one section with the dad when the mom returns home in part 2 and like things are happening and it's this like this spirit of like play, but it feels odd and almost like absurdist. Yeah. But to me, that is where we start to live in that in-between. And like, where is this old reality versus the new reality? And we're starting to kind of like lose our grip on like, which one is which? And are we looking at the duck or are we looking at the rabbit? I don't know. I feel like I've talked about this book ad nauseum, but I really did. It really sat with me. And I got so much more out of it the second read. So I would suggest. I'm just saying. Another book that I read this month was Dusk. This copy I got from my beloved Simon Savage. Savage Reads here on the YouTube. And I love this edition. He sent it to me from the UK. I'm obsessed with the physical book. I mean, I'm like this purple, like hello, and then how it matches the purple of this. So the story is about a set of twins who go hunting for a puma, and then the madness that ensues. There's like a nice twist, kind of a little bit of like treachery that takes place. I loved the ending. I actually enjoyed the prose. And I enjoyed the story at large. Like the story that was being told, I was into it. But my problem was is that I just was left wanting more. And if you've been here for a minute, I'm pretty good about knowing what that more that I want from something is. Yeah. Like I tend to have a pretty good grasp on like, this is what was missing for me, or this is what I loved from it. And what, but something about this left me lukewarm. And I prefer to be lukewarm, I guess, than like frustrated, you know what I mean? Or like angry. So I did none of those things. Like I enjoyed it. It was a solid work. And I don't know what I would do to fix it. And fix it for me. Like there's nothing to be fixed about it. I don't mean it that way. I just mean like, I don't know what I would change about it to make it sit with me in a way that was like, oh, that's what I wanted. You know what I mean? But I enjoyed it. Simon loved it. Simon loved this book. So, I mean, I encourage you to read it and come up with your own, you know, your own take on it. I think that the descriptions of like atmosphere and nature were really beautiful. There is also kind of like a possible dystopian element that's involved here because as the like surroundings are being described, it gets a little like something has gone on in this space. Yes. I also think it's an interesting commentary on our relationship with nature and with animals specifically, and like what role we play, and like how are we marrying our needs versus trying to like, you know, dominate and maybe like exert or force or kind of like I don't know, oppress others or animals. Yeah. So I think that's really interesting. But yeah, I just wanted more. I wanted more, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Simon. He's already texted me about this multiple times. And I'm sorry. I don't think we've had a full WhatsApp conversation about it, but we should do a FaceTime. Or maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe it's okay that you love it and I'm just about it. I don't know. One of the next books I read was Vaim by Jon Fosse. He won the Nobel Prize, I believe, last year. I am a huge fan of his septology. I could go on and on and on about it. This work, how would I describe this work? So there is a man, and the book opens, and he is going to buy thread and a needle because I believe he needs to sew on a button, I think. And it takes us through him being cheated, basically, by multiple vendors and forcing him to pay like an inordinate amount of money for this like thread and needle. And then it takes him, and this happens very quickly, but then he goes back to his boat, right, with his thread and needle, and this woman arrives, and it happens to be this woman that he has been in love with or was very much in love with in his youth, so much so that he named his boat after her. Then the book really revs and goes, right? The book is divided into 3 sections. And that first section, we get the man who owns the boat's perspective, right? That whole setup for the book. And then in the second section, we get that man's best friend. And then in the third section, we get the woman's ex-husband's perspective. It's fascinating. I think it's really at its core about like how we live, because in each one of these stories, death plays a role. Yeah. And so I think it's really about like how we like how we thread like our life and our choices and create these lives for ourselves, and in what ways are we taking active presence and choice and an active role in the making and crafting and weaving of our life, versus where are we maybe being led or taken advantage of, or like following. Yeah, it's really interesting. It's very Jon Fosse. It's very heady. There's no periods, right? Which like I love, but you got to really be into it. It's short. My understanding is that this is the first work in a trilogy. So there are three parts in this, but there are three like macro parts in the whole thing. I wonder if it will be like Septology, where it end up being like a honker and a half. We'll see. I am excited to see how it plays out and how he takes us all the way through the end of the story, because I'm down to clown with what he does. If you're not into it, you won't be into it. You know what I mean? Like, I think to me, he's one of those that it's very much like, this is what he does. I don't know if I would suggest this being your intro. I think this is the first one that he has written since winning the Nobel Prize. I don't think that this is a perfect intro. I would say Septology. I know that's a commitment. It's a honker and a half, but I have a shorter one of his hiding amongst the stacks. And so I may try to tackle that, like sneak it in before the end of the year. And I'll let y'all know if that's a better one to start with. So stay tuned about that. Next up, on my quest to read the New York Times top 10 books of the 21st century, I read Wolf Hall. Full disclosure, this was an immersive reading experience for me. I needed the audiobook with the physical book to get through it. From love. Okay. This one's tricky. And what's fun and fascinating about this is that folks have been all up in my comments saying that they dropped off and they didn't finish it. Then we've got the other half that are like, oh my God, I loved it so much. It's so incredible. Both of these POVs I understand. Okay. So the thing is, remember, this is the first in a trilogy. So she's using a lot of this to set us up, I think, for the whole trilogy. A. B, it does pay off in the end. I do think that the first chunk of it's a little slow. I think there's not tons happening, which in my historical fiction, I kind of need a little bit of like, get up and go. You know what I mean? I need a little action. I need a little this. I need a little that. I was hoping for some to be cut off. There was none. So I do think it was interesting. I will say, like, this period of history I'm like intrigued by, but it's not been one that I'm like a nerd about. So like Thomas Cromwell himself has not been someone that I'm just like, oh my God, this is such a fascinating take. Though those who are obsessed with this period have said that, right? So like, listen to them if that is one of the things that draws you through. But I will say, like, the last couple parts are worth it. I want to see. I feel like they're like 6 parts. I feel like halfway through part 4, it really starts to move. Yeah, we really start to book it. And that's a couple hundred pages in. So listen. Who am I? I think like won the Booker. It's also on the New York Times top 10 books. So like, again, who am I? But I'm trying to really also keep it real. And like all those things and these accolades and awards can be true. And also we can have really robust conversations that like a lot of y'all haven't gotten all the way through it. And like, I know why, because you got to push through like page 250 to like really get excited about it. And then the payoff's there. Okay. So listen, is there a world where you either rent or you buy the audiobook and then you get like a used copy of this? And then that's what helps get you through like the first chunk? Because I am happy that I read this, and I do feel like it came together and there was some excitement by the end. And like, do I have Bring Up the Bodies sitting like right over there? Yeah. So like I'm gonna read the second one if that like is any indication, right? So that to me is like an honest review of somebody who was excited about it, was into it at the end, but like I had my moments. There were several Instagram stories where I was literally in bed and I like just threw on the camera and I was like, what is happening? Like, what are y'all obsessed about? Because I have only heard like Wolf Hall, right? But again, I get it, people, very Oprah by the end. But if you are me, you are not alone. You know what I'm saying? Like, take a second, take a second. I was very graciously sent a copy of Olga Tokarczuk's House of Day, House of Night. I loved it. That said, this is not for everyone, okay? It is I think they call it a constellation novel. It's not a single plot that will drive you through the whole thing, okay? That said, there are like mini plots in it. I think that there's some really cool stories within it, but basically at its like largest premise, it is like set in a town, and for the most part it kind of like centers around these like two neighbors, okay? But then it goes off in all sorts of directions. And to me, the power of the work is in the themes and the way she tackles all sorts of themes. There is some like gender identity exploration here that is so fascinating and profound. I love the way Olga does it here, and I love the way they did it in the Impusium. I just think it's just done with such a deft hand. It's handled so delicately and yet like profoundly, but also like in your face. Like we're tap dancing around it until we're not, and then we're not tap dancing at all. You know what I mean? Like it's here and we're at the table and this is what's happening. And I really love it. Another one of the big themes in this book is like life and death, particularly death, and she uses a lot of mushroom imagery. That's so hard to say. Mushroom imagery throughout this, and it's really a commentary on this idea of society being obsessed with newness and how we cannot have this new life, these mushrooms, without the growth and decay and journey and learnings from aging and experiencing and like the progression of life. Yeah. Like we must have that in order for it to start to fester and disintegrate so that these mushrooms and this new life can grow from it. Yes. I think it's beautiful, and I feel like it's such that's the strongest through line for the entire work. I mean, we're using mushrooms to kill people. We're using mushrooms as foraging. We're eating them. We're just like, it's all kinds of really great imagery with mushrooms, and I think it's lovely. I really really loved this. I will say she's an author that kind of forces me to slow down a little bit. She's not, if you're looking to pick this up and just like sail through it, it's not the author for you. But if you're ready to like kind of like sit with it and you're down to clown with the lack of plot, I'm in. I need to read what is the one with the plow and the bones and the crunch, like plow your bones in the soil. It's not the midnight soil one. It's the plow your bones over the earth and crunch the bones in the soil. I don't know. I always forget the title, but that's like heavily on my list. But they sent me a copy of this, and I was really excited to read it. Okay, this next one comes out in February, I think. Yes, So Old, So Young. Totally different than these others that I read, but in like the best way. I feel like, especially, I mean, from all of these that we've talked about, like capital L, like literature, you know what I mean? I mean, the Fosse doesn't use periods. Like you know what I mean? Like highbrow, but like hopefully hopefully discussed accessibly, but this title is just like so consumable and fun and like not that, but well written and like well thought out and like uses really cool literary devices in a way that like I think at least for me I was able to totally appreciate this in like because it just did what it did so successfully. Does that make sense? It is, oh, can I remember this? I think it's six friends, five parties over 20 years. So it's a group of six friends, and the structure of the work is that we watch them age basically through five different parties spread over 20 years, and it is just lovely. And he uses this really cool literary device where each section within each party is divided into like from one of the friends' perspectives, right? Like divided by the friend. And he will use this really cool baton pass where like we'll have one character and it'll be like, oh, and on my way to the bathroom, I like saw this blonde like flip her hair out of the way. And then the next section will be like from another character's perspective. And she'll be like, I flipped my hair out of the way while I watched some random girl walk to the bathroom and blah, blah, blah. Does that make any sense? I don't know. But so you get this baton pass oftentimes between these like section breaks. And I think it's really cool. And he did it way better than I did. Like it's way better than what I just explained. So if the way I explained it didn't make it sound cool, that's because I didn't explain it well. Wild. But I also think it does this really cool job of tackling the millennial experience head on and like in a very not chuggy way. It feels, and not in a like disparaging way. I feel like the millennial generation has really been like hit with a lot of like the laziest, the worst. That like Gen Z hates them because they wear the jeans they wear, and boomers hate them because boomers are hoarding wealth, and like you know what I mean, like hand in hand. And like sure, every generation also has problems, but I just think that millennials kind of got like a weird like I don't know critique from every angle. And Gen X has just kind of like sat back and like stayed quiet, like smoked their cigarettes and chilled, right? But it's X, right? Gen Y? I don't know. Whatever's right above the millennials. What are they called? I don't remember. But anyways, but I think that like it's just done in a really interesting way. And I felt very like taken with it. I was moved. I laughed out loud. There are certain lines in it that I think are so funny. Um yeah, and it felt to me from someone who is a millennial and has had a large group of friends who throughout life, I mean, it was just before making this video, talking to one of my best friends of like 30 years. And I still go on vacations with some friends that I have like gone to middle school with, which is like, I feel grateful for because they're amazing people. But it just in that way felt very authentic to my lived experience and the complications that come with all of that, right? Like when you know someone for that long, there's just like there's a lot of history you're bringing into potentially like mundane conversations and situations, right? Because like there's a lot there. I just think he does it really well, and I think it's nice. I think it's super consumable. Again, I laughed, I cried. It was better than Cats, so yeah, into it. All right. Then we went, oh, well, really quick. So I got like halfway through Waiting on a Friend, which I cannot wait to talk to you all about. It comes out next year. It is about the AIDS epidemic, but from the perspective of a lesbian who can see ghosts. And now listen, y'all know me. If you've been around here for a hot minute, you know that's like not really my jam, but it's handled so well. I cannot wait to finish this and talk to y'all about it. And then I am halfway through The Known World, also in my quest to read the New York Times top 10 books of the 21st century. And this one is going to be rife for conversation. I was bummed I couldn't finish both of these in last month, but like life, right? And like life is good. And so I experienced life. But when I started it, it was a wrong book, wrong time. And now I kind of like forced myself to get into it. And I did like another like an immersive reading experience with this because I was like really wanted to kind of help pull myself through it. And again, I was like, oh, I was going back and forth and I was like, oh, I really respect it, period. And then I was like, oh, I'm really enjoying it. And it's really beautiful. And then there are other times I was like, wait, what? But I think I finally figured out what he's doing and like why it's called this. And there's like an interesting point in the book where we have that connection. And that is really pulling me through. And I think this is like rife for chat. It's rife for chat. So stay tuned. They'll be finished this week. No, they have to be. Oh my God, it's Monday. We're finished this week. Okay, then we went on audiobook adventures. Bottom of the pyramid. Y'all, I don't know about you. I was obsessed with this like era of reality television. I very much watched Dance Moms from the jump, probably when it was first aired live on that television. I think we've talked about it briefly on here, but I trained as an opera singer and sang for several years. And the only other kind of like artists that I found had similar kind of like emotionally tumultuous training experiences were dancers. So watching this was very intense, and like I was like, oh, I feel seen, and like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this woman is talking to these people that way. But then at the same time, that's like how those people talked to children, and like when you're training in that space. And so it was like a weird like navigation in experiencing that, and then coming now so many years later and reading Nia's like memoir, I guess maybe I would call it. It was really cool, and it was neat to like watch her kind of like work through some of the trauma that was like very real on that show, and like the rampant racism that she experienced, right? So that was, in a way that I didn't need to be cathartic and healing for me, very much was, and I hope it was for her as well. So yeah, I loved it. It was consumable, tricky at times, and like a little difficult, because it was like, oh wow, like this was really intense what she experienced. But I would recommend, like, especially if you're into that era of television and if you watch the show. Hello. Yeah. Oh my gosh, y'all. In my continued love affair and my membership to the Church of Stephen King, I listened to Misery. Obsessed. So before that, in October, I had read Carrie and Salem's Lot. One of the things I loved about actually both of those was that when he would build tension in a scene up to like an 75%, let's say, like somewhere in the middle of the book, 75%. Then we would switch perspectives and go to like a different scene or a different person, especially in Salem's Lot, right? We're really getting kind of like a 360-degree view of the town. But even in Carrie, we're getting like a 360-degree view of like what happened and like from everyone's perspectives, right? So we'll switch perspectives. But rarely would he ever, if ever, take the tension from where he built it to zero. So he would be at like 75, and then we would go to another character and he'd bring it down to 60. And then we would build up to like 80, and then we come to another character and he'd take it down to 65. And then so he's just like constantly taking you to this like climax, like edging you in this horror space to this ultimate climax, right? Which I loved. Now, Misery, that he does take all the way back to zero. And I was a little like, I like loved the artistry and, like the craft in the others from like that like narrative tension perspective. But someone, I think in the comments, talked about Misery and how the book was meant to reflect his drug addiction, I think Stephen King's, I believe. And if they're wrong, please don't come after me. allegedly, that it was like just to mirror, or maybe not his, but maybe to mirror drug addiction. And that to me is interesting because, and if you haven't read it, an author gets into a car accident, and this woman rescues him and brings him to her home. Turns out she's his biggest fan. I'm sure most of all of you know, but just in case, for the like 3 of you who are watching who don't know the plot, which is valid. I mean, I haven't read it until recently, and I don't think I've seen the whole movie. I've just seen clips because I'm obsessed with Kathy Bates. Obsessed. Which I know, how could you be obsessed with Kathy Bates and not watch the movie? I know. I'm filled with juxtaposition and multitudes. So she takes him there, and then we quickly find out that she's has a screw or two that's just not quite tightened the way it needs to be. And then as the book keeps going, we find out there might be just whole swaths of machinery that have been removed and replaced, yeah, in the way that she thinks and moves through space and interacts with people. But one of the key elements at the beginning of the book is she realizes that he has killed off her favorite character. And she says, well, that won't do. So you're going to stay here and write another one. So he writes this other book. And in the book, the book Misery that Stephen King wrote, will go back and forth between the perspective within the room and within the horrors of what's happening with this woman who has like ends up kidnapping. They're refusing to let this man leave, this author, and then the book that he's writing. And in that way, when we go into the book that he's writing, tension to zero, right? And so someone was saying that like horrors to zero mimicked that sort of like drug addiction, which is fascinating. And I would love to like look more into that because I think there's a lot to dissect there. And I love that idea of like, I wonder if Kathy Bates's character is the addiction. And so like her showing up and her like making him feel euphoric at times, right? Because she would give him shots so that she could do crazy things. And like, I don't know. It's fascinating. I really want that to be true. So I'm perpetrating the lie that it is, with the caveat, huge caveats. So yeah, but I loved the audiobook. I think it's absolutely worth an exploration if you've been putting it off for whatever reason. I do think it's really intense. So like be warned in that way, but it's really great. And also great in a different way than Carrie and Salem's Lot. Okay, so then I listened to the audiobook Hamnet. I know I'm late to the party. My whole heart was ripped out. It was like clenched in front of me and just like shredded into oblivion. I thought it was beautiful. I thought that the author did an incredible job of writing this very fine line. It could have very easily tipped into like a saccharine, kind of like overly florid, like, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but like in a very like the way the world has like put these books into like boxes that are made up, but like a women's lit kind of space. I think it could have gone into that space and like and really capitalized on some of the negative things I think that exist within some of those tropes, but it didn't. And I thought that she really rode that line so brilliantly, and it would just had a massive emotional impact on me. I thought it was so creative. I thought that the idea and the way that she structured it and the way that it was just packed this emotional wallop really like also lent itself to the idea and the ending. I can't. Quick side note, I also saw the movie. Y'all, it has like a feminine touch and it has like feminine fingerprints all over it. The author, I believe, co-wrote it with the director, and you just feel that. You feel their synergy in the adaptation, into the filming of it, into just the shots. Like it's just so beautiful. It also was so reverent and respectful of the source material. Certain changes that they made from the source material mainly was like in ordering, right? Like in the book, we start with one of the characters getting ill, and in in the movie it's linear, and it's so beautiful. And I think it's done really, really beautifully. I actually talked to a colleague recently, and she said she was at a screening or a premiere maybe of it in Canada. And I believe that the director was there, and she had everyone do like a breathing exercise, I think, before it started. Makes me emotional just thinking about it. I love it. I think it should win all the awards. And I went in like, I was like, okay, I'm sure this is gonna make me cry, but like, what are we doing here? Uh, Obsessed. I think it was just got nominated for 6 Golden Globes, if memory serves. Don't quote me on that, but I think in and around there. I think the lead actor should win. That could probably be a whole video, but this is great. I would suggest listening to it or reading it, and definitely go to see the movie. If you were worried about it because you loved the book, I think that the movie absolutely does justice to the book. Like it felt so respectful. It was so respectful. Oh my gosh. And then the last audiobook adventure is one of the New York Times top 5 fiction books of 2025. It was The Director. It was fine. It was fine. It's about a movie director, for the most part set in Austria. I didn't dislike it. It, to me, was not one of the top 5 fiction books of 2025. I don't. There's a world I could see the argument for it being on the list of the 100. Like, okay, that to me is like such a broad. Like, I don't know, like what criteria we're using for like why they would deserve or not. But top 5. It's just the prose was nice. I just felt like the story was like, eh. You know what I mean? Like, I get the story. There were moments of it, actually, to be fair, that were very intriguing to me, that really brought me along, that I thought that were really interesting and captivating. But I felt like as a whole, it didn't do that. And I also felt like the way it told the story, it didn't, the whole story didn't capture me enough. You know what I mean? There were elements that were super interesting and I was super intrigued by, and I was really into it, but it just didn't feel like it. I don't know, almost like Dusk just in the sense of like, I wanted something more. And maybe it was that I wanted them to take certain elements of it and like double down and be like, yeah, this is what happened, or this is what we're saying. But it all just felt like it was like withheld just a little bit, or like holding back just a little bit, but not in like a refined, dignified way, in just like it kept everything a little placid for me kind of way. I don't know. That's just me. It was, I mean, who am I? The Times loved it. People seem to love it. So great. But it was just like, whatever. You know, like, I don't know if I would, I don't know. We'll do a whole video. I'm almost done with the top 5. Oh, well, I say that. I have The Sisters, which is a honker and a half. I'm going to really attack that so we can talk about that New York Times top 5 list sooner versus later. But yeah, this was my reading wrap up from November. It was quite full. And yet, you know, I was still beating myself up for not finishing these 2. But listen, life. And this was actually a lot of books. So yeah, I had a good month. It was good, all in all. What did you all read this month? I need to know your highs. I need to know your lows. And again, one last time before we go, tell your friends, hit subscribe, hit like, text it to somebody, and I will see you next week.